All right, so after the KR patch hit and I saw the changes to Deadeye, I had to make one. Desperado, going around zooming, even being a propulsion character, it looked fun, it looked wacky, I had to do it. With Slayer out, I just deleted my Berserker, made a Deadeye, but I was too cheap to buy a Powerpass. And I thought it'd be good to see how long it would take to actually get these levels as opposed to a Powerpass. So like, how much time are you actually saving with the Powerpass? Now, this wasn't completely no purchasing. There were some different rules that I applied. These aren't the exact numbers. I really only bought out materials when I only had one thing being a bottleneck, and it was like near the end. But I did also buy the shards for Pirate Board ship vendors, and I did Una dailies for Guardian Stones only. I put everything I did on a notepad, so let's start with tier 1. The tier 1 went pretty quick. It only took me 3 days. So we got Chaos Dungeon, we got Guardian Raids, we did those for 3 days, got the first 4 dungeons, I did the T1 Tower, I did only buy blue and red stones when they were my bottleneck, and they're at 1 gold apiece, so why not? And then I also did use the vendor for pirate coins to buy the shards. So yeah, T1 went really quick. If I were to not buy anything at all, it would probably only take me an additional day. So things are going good, but T2 did take longer, and I had to break one of my rules later on in it. So it took me 5 days, with 5 days of chaos, 5 days of dungeons. I only did the Yorn Epistle dungeons. Doing Gates of Paradise, it's just too hard to find a group and not worth the time at this point. Now, by the time I did T2 Tower, I was really only bottlenecked by leap stones. So I only went up to floor 45 because the rest of it was Guardian Stones and then shards. So what I did is I got 50 leap stones from Anguish Isle on a different character. I did the ship vendor for shards again, and then I did buy about 100 leap stones. This is because it was my only bottleneck. So if I were to not go out of my way for those other resources, it probably would have took me additional about 4 days, I would say, to get through tier 2. Now tier 3, I stopped at 1340 because that's when the power passes end. So it actually only took me 2 days of chaos, 2 days of guardians. I did get 64 honor leap stones from Anguish Isle, and I did be able to buy 2 weeks of honor shards for the ghost ship vendor or the pirate ship vendor because I was able to get to it the day before reset and then the day of reset within those 2 days. Now, some things to note is, first, I did knowledge transfer all the story. So if you were to go through it naturally, you would have some extra resources, meaning you would probably cut down a day or 2 of your total time probably if you were to run through the story. Keep in mind, those are good sources of experience, and for Southfront, that is a good source of cards as well. For me, however, this is a side project character, and I couldn't put that much time into it. So yeah, these are not definitive numbers. This is just how long it took me. So in total, it took me 3 days for tier 1, 5 days for tier 2, and up to 1340 at tier 3, it took me 2 days. So the total time it took me for the cost of a $66 power pass was 10 days with some gold spent. So if you were to factor doing in the story and not buying anything, I would say probably an additional 5 days or so would be your total time. Now, something to note is you don't have to power pass everything. So if you so choose, you can run some of it manually and power pass through some of it. If you were to do this, I would say 100% skip Phaeton. If I were to skip Phaeton, I probably would have cut it off about another 3 days, which is the longest one out of all those parts. This is because in tier 1 and tier 2, you get every other hone free. So going through Yorn was pretty fast because, again, all of that was free hones. But by the time you get to plus 12, you're in Phaeton, and then those last hones are very expensive, and that's where I really need a lot of leap stones that I did not have. So yeah, if you only want to spend like $11 US, naturally progress to Yorn, buy out Phaeton, and then go through the rest. Now, something I should note is I am lucky to have friends who are willing to run me through those Guardian raids. So I was able to get ran through all my Guardian raids and also get the first time boxes of everything that I could. This is definitely going to be the biggest bottleneck and problem for players who are just getting into the game who might not have friends to run them through. Because I looked through matchmaking and I couldn't find really any parties. I tried find party, couldn't really find parties. And soloing them is probably not going to be a great experience for a newer player. And if you are a new player watching this, be aware that power will probably be frustrating and a little rough at some points, but you will learn a little bit going through it. So it's not like a horrible experience. But again, you cannot do it. You'll just take longer because you're going to be just doing more days of Chaos and Guardians. So is it worth it to power pass or level through it naturally? That's still up to you. But now you get a general idea how long it took somebody like me to go through it with spending very little gold and no money. Overall, I think that for a new player getting to this game without a power pass, without an event and all that kind of stuff, this is still pretty rough for a new player because this is going to be roughly about 15 days. And it's going to be even longer if they don't have all these extra avenues to get materials or able to finish tower. Now, there are 2 more ways of getting materials that I did not mention earlier that I should mention now, which is going to be your login events and if you have an event going. Now, you do get a hefty amount of leap stones and shards from these login event chests. So if you really do want to juice through the earlier tiers, you could use those. Personally, I think saving these chests and everything for tier 3 is the best way to go, and I'll explain that later. That is because I'm actually going to continue on with this and see what the honing experience is like going through these and trying to get to actual near end game. And spoiler alert, it's not looking good. So again, to some of my thoughts is it didn't take me long to get to this point, but for me, it's not that bad. For a new player, this is not good. This is a game that gets its reputation around the classes itself and also the end game, which you're not gonna be able to experience the joys of these classes without their sets, which is gonna be way deeper. And then end game, obviously, it's gonna be a long time. You're gonna be going through 15 days of solo content just to get to 1340. If we're talking about getting to Legion raids with no power pass or no hyper express, this is awful for a new player. And I absolutely do not agree or do not care about all these boomer takes of, well, I had to go through this, why shouldn't these new players do it? This is why the game is hemorrhaging players. This is why people aren't staying. It's because they don't get to experience the game for what it is, because it just takes so long to get to really the fruitful parts of the game. So I do think some bigger nerfs and some changes to these older parts would definitely help newer players. Because even if Fortnite Freddy starts playing the game during a Hyper Express, a Power Pass, and stuff like that, he has one character, he's still gonna have to kind of gear up 5 other characters if he wants to do his ults. So yeah, that was my Deadeye leveling experience. That's my thoughts on Power Pass again. So it took me 10 days roughly versus the $66 to buy a Power Pass. For me, it was pretty worth it because, again, this is a side project which I didn't really do much time into. It's really up to you how much money you want to spend and if it's worth the time for you. Thanks for watching, and it's gonna be a while until I get the follow-up video for this because, like I said before or hinted towards, it gets pretty rough.